Good evening. Good evening, everyone. What an incredible group. The conversations, you can tell, are already so rich. I'm Dan Lugo, and I'm the president of Queen's University of Charlotte, and it's my honor to welcome you to the keynote address for our second annual Presbyterian and Pluralist Week. I'm delighted to see Belk Chapel filled with guests who represent a diverse cross-section of our community. We gather tonight from different campuses, different faith traditions and worldviews, different civic and political backgrounds, and together with a commitment to learn more about how we might make the most of our religiously diverse democracy. We are indeed fortunate to have Eboo Patel, a renowned scholar and visionary on this topic, here to inform and inspire us tonight. Eboo, thank you for joining us. Here at Queen's, we offer students what we call a yes-and experience that combines academic with co-curricular learning, learning that is in turn shaped by our motto, not to be served, but to serve. Tonight's event fits well with both of these aims as we consider how our differing faith traditions and worldviews inspire us to work together toward the flourishing of all people. So welcome to Queen's, welcome to Belk Chapel. We are all so glad to see you here. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Suzanne Watts-Henderson, Dean of Belk Chapel, and our chaplain Joey Haynes and I would like to add a warm welcome to this beautiful snapshot of a diverse Charlotte bound together by a shared commitment to the flourishing of all people. Let me extend a word of thanks to the Foundation for the Carolinas and to Covenant Presbyterian Church for helping to underwrite this evening's festivities. Their investment in our time together represents, in my view, just the kind of partnership between faith and philanthropic groups that's vital to the vision Eboo Patel will cast tonight. Let me tell you a little story. 5 years ago, I'm driving Eboo back to the airport after his first visit to Queen's. He looks at me with those steely brown eyes and says, "Suzanne, we can keep you busy all day long doing this work." "But Eboo," I pushed back, "I'm a New Testament scholar with an active research agenda of my own. I teach 4 courses a semester. I'm not sure I have time to go down this path." "Fair enough," he says as he relaxes back into his seat. Since then, a broad coalition of people from across our university have been at work to foster robust interfaith engagement in the classroom and beyond. With help from our friends at Interfaith Youth Corps, we crafted a Presbyterian and Pluralist strategic plan that's been guiding our way ever since. Yes, Eboo and his minions have kept me and many, many others very, very busy all day long. If you've read Eboo's book, Acts of Faith, you know that both his Muslim identity and his vision for our religiously diverse democracy grow organically out of his own interfaith journey. Genetically wired for both service and human connection, Eboo is inspired by his Muslim tradition and informed by solid academic study as he makes the case for the central and positive role religion can still play in our life together. As gifted as Eboo is, and I hope you'll read the bio on the back of your program, perhaps his greatest strength is how he recognizes and cultivates talent. The Interfaith Youth Corps, the organization that he started and leads, is a team, really almost a family, of some of the smartest and most committed folks I've ever had the pleasure of working with. In turn, they inspire and equip students, faculty, and staff at literally hundreds of campuses across the country, sometimes even those who have their own research agendas and teaching loads. Friends, it is with great joy that I welcome to the stage Eboo Patel. Eboo, welcome to Queens, welcome to Belk Chapel, and to Presbyterian and Pluralist.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So in Quranic exegesis, there's amongst many, two key terms, Zahir and Batin. Zahir is the external meaning of the Quran, the written word itself. Batin is what's happening beneath the surface. There was a Zahir and a Batin in that car ride with Suzanne. The Zahir was me saying, we can keep you busy. The Batin was the Jedi mind trick she was playing on me of like, I've been planning Interfaith Queens for 10 years, and I'm going to employ you in the project that I've got been going on. So Suzanne kind of comes across as this like, aw shucks. She is a ninja. Trust me. Trust me. Her husband says to me today, you're going to want to start a union after Suzanne works you. So it's only been a day, but I'm going to start organizing. So here's a city that's diverse but divided. Mostar in Bosnia-Herzegovina. If you work for the Catholic Fire Department in Mostar, you don't respond to fires in the Muslim part of town. If you're Catholic, you go to school from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. If you're Muslim, you go to school in the same buildings, 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. If you're Catholic and you like to dance, you go to a nightclub called Pink Panther. If you're Muslim and you like to dance, you go to a nightclub called Art. Catholics root for one soccer team, Muslims root for another soccer team. The only integrated institution in that whole city, which, by the way, is not at war. This is Mostar at peace. The only integrated institution in that whole city is the garbage dump. But if a particularly bad-tempered person is working there, he won't let in garbage from the Muslim part of town. It's all true. It's from a New York Times piece. Mostar is a diverse city. It is diverse and divided. Nobody says diversity has to lead to beautiful things. Don't believe all the posters that they put up in elementary schools. Diversity can very easily become something ugly, very easily become division. It's a different possibility for diversity. Wilmar, Minnesota, population 21,000, somehow has welcomed and resettled immigrants and refugees from dozens of parts of the world. If you walk into the high school in Wilmar, Minnesota, you will see a large map up in the lobby with pins that show the places in the world that the students at Wilmar High School come from. If you spend time in that school, you will recognize that the teaching staff and the administration have learned something of the culture and the language and the religion and the heritage of their students from 37 parts of the world in little Wilmar, Minnesota. Businesses have contributed to an entrepreneurship program, $1,000 each from 50 small businesses. Every kid at Wilmar High School, whether they speak English well or not, whether they read at a 12th grade level or a 3rd grade level, remember, half of these kids grew up in refugee camps, has the opportunity to pitch a business idea to the business community in Wilmar. The best ones get funded. Somali kid's about to start a film company there. Best business idea came out of a kid that came from Somalia. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota has funded a Good Ideas series of dinners. People in their homes, in their houses of worship, gather in the tradition of that space, the food, the customs, the prayers, and they discuss their ideas for Wilmar 2030. Wilmar, Minnesota is a diverse city in a spirit of cooperation. I have a friend who says that diversity is not rocket science. It's harder. It's a question for Charlotte, one of the most rapidly diversifying cities in the United States. Are you tending towards Mostar, or are you tending towards Wilmar? I'll tell you something right now. What's happening in Wilmar didn't fall from the sky, didn't rise from the ground. People built it. Somebody decided we're going to be the kind of school that leans into our diversity. We're going to put this map in the lobby. We're going to make sure that the teaching staff and the administration has an appreciative knowledge of the places where our students are coming from. We're going to make sure that everybody here feels welcome and safe and smart and valued. That's who we're going to be. This is the future of our community. The businesses in Wilmar, Minnesota, looked around and recognized, you're the future. You're the ones who are going to be starting the small businesses and the large businesses in 10 or 20 years, or maybe 10 or 20 weeks. You're the ones who are going to be running the civic associations. So we're going to invest in you. And we're going to put some skin on the line. The big companies located in and around Wilmar recognized, hey, good ideas come from everywhere. Everybody's responsible. So everybody gets a chance to play the host. Everybody gets a chance, whether you're the masjid, or whether you're the temple, or whether you're the church, or whether you're the Secular Humanist Society. In your customs and your traditions, you welcome people and you nurture the best out of them. What does it take to be more like Wilmar than Mostar? What does it take for diversity to lead to cooperation rather than division? So Robert Putnam, great social scientist at Harvard, in a famous paper called E Pluribus Unum, begins the paper with this line: the one thing we can safely say about every community, every city, every society, is that it will be more diverse tomorrow than it is today. And that is going to be a challenge. So here's one of the most interesting facts of American life. In 1980, a third of white people lived in geographies that were 98% white. Today, that number is less than 5%. Our geographies have gotten dramatically more diverse. But our social circles have remained homogeneous. The Public Religion Research Institute recently did a study that found that the huge number of Americans say that their social circle is racially, religiously, and ideologically homogeneous. We live in a different country than we did in 1980, but we don't live in different social circles. That does not lead us to Wilmar. What does it take to engage our diversity so that it becomes pluralism? Diversity, as Diane Eck at Harvard says, is simply a fact of our demographic life. It's just the identities of the people around you. Mostar is diverse. Pluralism is an achievement. Pluralism is what we work towards. Pluralism is a state in which people respect each other's identities. They have relationships between communities, and they're constantly cultivating an ethos of the common good, a sense of cooperation, a sense that we are in it together. What does it take for diversity to lead to pluralism? I think the first thing it takes is a good story, a good image, a better metaphor. Walter Lippmann famously says, the way the world is imagined will determine at any given moment what human beings will do. The way the world is imagined will determine at any given moment what human beings will do. My one quibble with Thomas Friedman's piece on Wilmar, Minnesota, where his aunt and uncle happen to live, is that he says, this is the great American melting pot. It's time to put that metaphor away. America's not a melting pot. I don't want to melt. Sounds like it would hurt. America's a potluck supper. America is a potluck supper. And if you want a good potluck supper, everybody's got to contribute. And if you want a really good potluck supper, people better not all bring the same thing. Imagine if you worked all week on your grandfather or your grandmother's famous recipe, and you showed up at the potluck ready to make your distinctive contribution, and there's a giant melting machine that's melting it into the same goo as everybody else's wonderful, delicious, distinctive. That is my nightmare. Why are potlucks so important? I think it's the best metaphor for a diverse democracy driven by a civil society. No mayor, no president, no general can command a potluck. Civic leaders decide that they're going to do this. It requires the contributions of people from different backgrounds. In fact, it depends on them. We are expecting the best of our friends and neighbors. We know that if we host, that they will come and that what they bring will be delicious. And it's not individual dishes that make a potluck. It's these strange and wonderful combinations. Sure, folks stay around the set of dishes that they're most comfortable with at first, but then all of a sudden you're trying that interesting bread with that awesome dip next to that great vegan whatever is. And you're like, man, this is great. What does it look like to think of Charlotte, America, as a potluck supper? A place where diverse and distinctive contributions are welcomed, where interesting combinations are the norm, where people take responsibility for the common good, a clean and safe space, enough dishes and silverware. What does it take for that to happen? Look, the first thing it takes is leadership, right? Somebody has to lead. Somebody has to open his or her doors to that potluck. Somebody has to say, I'm building it here and I'm trusting that you will come. And my favorite story of potluck leadership, of diverse democracy leadership, is a children's story. It's the stone soup story. You all know this story, right? From Hebrew school or from Sunday school or from Quran school or from kindergarten. So I'm going to tell it as a story of interfaith leadership, a story of diverse democracy leadership. You have a village that is starving. People are isolated, afraid of one another. The folks across the street speak English in an accent we don't quite recognize. The ones around the way, they pray to God in a different language. We don't talk to anybody. We keep our doors locked and our blinds closed. Well, a traveler comes into this town. She's carrying a pack on her back. She sets up in the town square, builds a roaring fire, goes to the river, takes a pot out of that pack on her back, fills it with water, comes back, places it on the fire, takes out a wooden ladle, begins to stir. The kids in the town start to get curious. They make their way out of their homes, start to gather around this woman, ask her what she's doing. She reaches into her pack and says, I'm making stone soup, holds up a magic rock, places it in, smiles, twinkle in her eye, begins to stir again. When's it going to be ready? One of the more impudent kids yells. That would be my 9-year-old, no doubt. When's it going to be ready? We're hungry. Takes a sip. Not quite there. Needs some carrots. Somebody says, we have carrots. Everybody turns. You have food? I thought everybody in this village was starving. That family goes back, gets the carrots they've hidden away, comes back, slices them up, throws them in the soup. Is it ready yet? She takes a sip. Not quite. Needs some potatoes. Family says, we have potatoes. Everybody turns to look. You have food? I thought we were all starving here, scared of each other, isolated. Family goes back, brings the potatoes, slices them up, throws them in. Is it ready yet? Takes a sip, needs some spices. We got spices. Is it ready yet? It's ready, but it would go great with some bread and butter. We got bread and butter. and on and on and on. By the end of the day, this village, this isolated, separated, scared of each other village, is feasting. There's a potluck. The woman smiles, washes out her bowl, her pot, heads on to the next starving village. America is that village right now. Scared of each other, isolated. You know what Robert Putnam says that diversity does, at least at the beginning? It lowers trust. It reduces social bonds. People pull in like turtles, he said. That's what happens when diversity first emerges. Unless, he points out, that area, that town, that village, that city has a different story of itself. Unless they see themselves as a potluck that invites contributions, and unless they have civic leaders that are helping that city live into that story. What's special about the woman in the stone soup story? What makes her a remarkable leader? 3 things. Number 1, vision. She comes into a starving, isolated village, and you know what she sees? A community. I want you to think about that for a second. Marcel Proust, the great French writer, has this beautiful line. The true voyage of discovery is not in seeing new landscapes, it's in developing new eyes. Every single one knows somebody who does this. Every single one has done this in our own lives. You've seen a ragged group of 11-year-olds, and you have imagined it into a team. Right? You bring a different set of eyes to a community. You are witness to a young person who doesn't know her own potential, and you see an exceptional scholar or a remarkable athlete or a kind human being. You have a different vision on a situation. The first thing that our hero does, our civic leader does, is instead of agreeing, stipulating to this being a starving, isolated village that's divided, she sees a community. Second thing that she does, she has knowledge of what people can contribute. I love this about Wilmar, right? There is a knowledge that the principal, Paul Schmitz, in that high school has. There's a knowledge that those business leaders have. There's a knowledge that the longtime civic leaders have of the contribution or the possible contribution of all of these people. An appreciative knowledge. If the only thing that you know about a whole group of people, whether it's Muslims or Christians or evangelicals or atheists, is the bad stuff, it is a sign of your ignorance. I'm going to say that again, right? If the only thing you know about entire groups of people is the bad stuff, the only thing I know about Muslims, I need to know about Muslims is 9/11 kind of stuff, it is a sign of your ignorance. Part of the mark of an educated person is recognizing and being able to see the contribution or potential contribution of every individual and community. That's the second leadership quality that our hero has. And the third thing is, she had the principal civic genius of creating an activity that brought out the best in people. She didn't roll into the village and say, "Hey, you idiots, bring out your food." She created an activity that invited people's highest selves. Listen, this is what we do in summer camps and on the best sports teams and in good classrooms all the time. We create a space where, in the language of Dorothy Day of the Catholic Worker, it is easier for people to be their best. The diverse democracy version of that is, how do you create spaces where it is easier for people to cooperate? That village in the morning was a space divided. Its diversity was leading to division. in the afternoon with the right activity, led by the right leader who had a vision, a knowledge base, and a skill set, it was a village achieving pluralism. Listen, I keep calling this woman in the story our hero, right? That's all of us. That's all of us who bring those eyes to those kinds of situations. The eyes that see community when other people are just thinking isolation and division. A knowledge base that recognizes contribution when other people are only thinking the worst of other folks. A skill set that is able to create activities that brings out the best in folks and nurtures a cooperation when other people are throwing up their hands. So where do these civic leaders come from? I mean, having gotten to know Suzanne, I get the sense that she just descended from the sky whole as a civic leader. But the rest of us who are mortal, somebody has to teach us, right? And that's why I think colleges and universities are so important. It was, at least for me, in college, where I developed the set of eyes to see community where other people only saw division, where I acquired a knowledge base of the recognition of contributions of people from all over the world, where I acquired the skills to run the kind of activities that would bring out people's best and that would nurture cooperation. I said this a little earlier tonight, but it bears repeating. Andy Delbanco, the great professor of American civilization at Columbia University, he says, on a list of anything that America has contributed to human civilization, the best of America, right? Jazz, baseball, our national park system, our Constitution, he said, on any of these most important contributions lists, America's colleges and universities would rank near the top. I mean, I just think that's remarkable, right? Like, we sit in an American treasure. Why? Part of what these places do is they nurture students, often young people, into the kind of civic leaders exemplified in the Stone Soup story. People with a different set of eyes, the eyes of possibility, a wider knowledge base, a deeper skill set. Colleges and universities are able to affirm particular identity, the Presbyterian history of Queen's University, and lean positively into diversity. There's not a lot of institutions that can do that. There's a whole bunch of places that think, how do I get to the next quarterly report? Colleges and universities think, how do we make sure that the next generation is living better together? These places think generationally. They set the definition of what an educated person is. They model what civil society can be. They create civic priorities for the rest of our nation. These are magical spaces. Magical spaces. So that's what I think it takes for a diverse city to tend towards Wilmar and not Mostar, pluralism and not division. It takes the right kind of metaphor, the right kind of story, right? More potluck than melting pot. It takes the right kind of leaders. And it takes places, institutions that can serve as models and laboratories for those leaders. So I want to end with this. I want to end with what I think is one of the great story changes in American history, led by a set of leaders. So, when the Pilgrims arrived on the eastern seaboard and they dusted off Plymouth Rock, the words Judeo-Christian nation were etched in the stone. No, that's a lie. Almost had you. I had to make sure you all were awake. Actually, that's not true, as everybody knows, right? But it's interesting, right? Think for a second. If that's not where Judeo-Christian nation came from, where did it come from? Did Thomas Jefferson write it into the Declaration of Independence? Nope. Did God give it to Moses on Sinai? Nope. So where does it come from? This term that we use so easily and often. So here's the real history of that term, which, by the way, I think is even better than the etched in the stone thing. 1920 is a particularly ugly era in American life, minus the jazz part. Ku Klux Klan numbered 3 to 4 million people, violently racist, violently anti-Semitic, violently anti-Catholic. 1928, a man named Al Smith, governor of New York, first Catholic to run for president on a major party ticket. And the Ku Klux Klan thinks to itself, this is our chance to make a national impact. And they torpedo his campaign. Say things like, Al Smith opened, I think it was the Holland Tunnel, so that he could sneak the Pope in more quickly to the United States. Right? We will be one nation under the Pope. This is, sounds, like it gives rise to a chortle in 2020, but in 1928, these were fighting words. These were vile, bigoted statements. And Al Smith's campaign goes up in flames, and America gets Herbert Hoover. So, I was just pausing. But that's not the end of the story, right? That's not the end of the story. America at the time, we have to remember, understands itself like bone deep as a Protestant nation. Franklin Roosevelt says, this is a Protestant country. The Jews and Catholics are here under sufferance. Okay, the great liberal lion, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But in 1928, a group of civic leaders come together, a group of interfaith leaders, rabbis, pastors, priests, Protestants, Catholics, Jews, call themselves the National Conference for Christians and Jews. And they decide, we can't be a nation that willingly violates the dignity of people from different religious backgrounds, which at that time largely meant Catholics and Jews. We can't be a nation that excludes their contributions. After all, a civil society and a democracy literally requires people to contribute, to participate. Otherwise, you have no country. If people don't participate, if they don't contribute, you have no nation. People don't bring a dish to the potluck, you have no potluck. That's how democracies function. We can't exclude their contributions. We can't violate their dignity. We need to do something. We cannot forfeit the territory of this nation to the Ku Klux Klan and associated forces. So they start to run things called tri-faith dialogues across the nation and at military bases around the world. This is the lead up to World War II, and the line that they would repeat over and over again, forgive the gendered language. This is the 1930s. America is about the brotherhood of man, Protestant, Catholic, Jew, under the fatherhood of God. But they recognize something, that however far you get in civic activities, however important they are, a nation to change needs a new metaphor, needs a different language, a different story. So you know what they did? They invented a word. Judeo-Christian. It's invented. And not in the 1500s, not 500 years before then. We didn't inherit it from centuries of great theologians. A group of American interfaith leaders in the 1930s made it up. Why? Because they wanted Jews and Catholics to be included in the American civic fold, viewed fully as Americans, equal citizens, participants, and contributors to our diverse democracy. People in spaces in which I run sometimes roll their eyes at Judeo-Christian America, and I understand that, but I guess my initial instinct is to say, would you have preferred to have been a Catholic in America in 1990 or in 1920? No, because I played a little bit role in the Obama administration. I happened to be on the south lawn of the White House when Pope Francis was introduced in, I believe it was October of 2015. And I thought to myself, somebody wake Norman Vincent Peale up from the grave, because we have a black president and a pope in Washington, and this is literally his nightmare. This is what he said would come true, right? And I am having a great time, by the way. But I think that this is the most remarkable thing. When we saw something in our society we didn't like, a bigotry run amok, an exclusion of certain contributions, a violation of people's dignity, we invented something that solved the problem. We created a set of civic activities. We created a new organization called the NCCJ. We invented a word. Roland Barthes, the great French scholar, says, a myth is a story that has gotten so deeply woven into a society's fabric that people forget that at some point, some dude just made it up. So, we now live in a nation where there are about as many Muslims as there are ELCA Lutherans, twice as many Muslims as there are Episcopalians, the church that, when they went to church, our founding fathers tended to go to. About as many Buddhists as there are Muslims, a growing and complex group of Hindus, increasing Jains and Sikhs and Baha'is, as many Jews as there are Methodists, a rising number of NONES nuns, the most religiously diverse nation in human history. Judeo-Christian did good work for 80 years. It's time for the next chapter. And this is not to take anything away from Judeo-Christian. What is America but a story in which every generation writes the next chapter with proper appreciation and honor to the past and always moving forward? Always moving forward. So the eyes of the world are on Charlotte in August 2020. I hear you're going to have a little conference happening here. So what if that event is an opportunity for the world to see a religiously diverse city at cooperation? An opportunity to see people from atheist to Zoroastrian doing positive things together, poetry slams and art projects and visions of the good society and service work. What if the Today Show and Good Morning America and the Sunday morning talk shows and a big photo spread in the New York Times was on what interfaith America, Charlotte style, looked like? A previous generation did this. They just made up a term. We lived into that story. It would be a gift to the nation if you could do it now for all of us. Thank you.
I always say about Eboo that it's a shame that his dreams and visions are so tiny. Thank you for that stirring call to our city. You get on an airplane tomorrow and head back to Chicago, and we will wrestle with that challenge, and we will take it up. So thank you. We move now toward a time with students. We have with us 4 wonderful students who are named in your program, and they come from a variety of backgrounds, a variety of majors, a variety of geographic locations, but they all have touched on interfaith engagement both in the classroom and outside of it during their time at Queens. And so we've invited them to pose questions to Eboo that really touch on their areas of interest. So Marasha, I'm gonna let you lead us.
Hi, my name is Marasha Winokur. I'm majoring in art history, studio art, and arts leadership and administration, and I'm involved in the Hillel on campus. In my art history thesis, I'm studying how art has the power to shape the ideas of a society, including how we view people who aren't like us. So my question is, how can interfaith leadership in creative spaces help to build a culture of respect, understanding, dialogue, and even cooperation?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I want to lean into your arts background, right? And I want to say that being from Chicago, we have Chagalls all around us. And right outside Bank One, Chase Bank Plaza, there's Chagall's Four Seasons. And at the Art Institute, there's, I think it's called the Floating Christ, or the Floating Jesus, this picture of Jesus floating above a village. And there's the America windows, which is probably my favorite. And, here's this Jewish artist with a Russian heritage who's like painting out of his spiritual religious imagination these images of people from different backgrounds in like beautiful harmony, so much of my inspiration comes from religiously based artists, from Rumi, from Tagore, from Blake, from Chagall, and so I think so much of our vision of what is possible of the good society comes from that intersection of spirituality and art.
So I'm going to speak a little bit about how interfaith has changed me before I ask the question. My name is Rose Saul. I'm a sophomore here at Queens, and I'm a human services major, as well as a Davies Fellow and a leader in Muslim Student Association. I was raised Muslim in a small town called Wake Forest, North Carolina, about like 2.5 hours from here. And I was never exposed to the different religion and spirituality around me. It was kind of a bubble. And it wasn't until I came here and I met our chaplain Joey and my RA Jeannie that they showed me what interfaith was. And I was able to stop and think about how religion and spirituality really fuels all of us in here, and it influences our decisions. And in order for us to live in a society where we work together and we become stronger and we grow, we have to understand those differences. So thanks for founding Interfaith Leadership Youth Corps.
Thanks for being an interfaith leader.
Thanks. So in Dr. Henderson's global religion class, we're currently reading the book, My Neighbor's Faith. And in it, you talk about your experience working in a Catholic workers' house. And as a human services major and community volunteer, I'm interested in serving those who struggle to get by. So I wanted to see if you could speak more as to how the interfaith movement can help us uplift those around us.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, this is my way into religion, period, and interfaith work more specifically was by watching people of deep faith serve people in ways that I wanted to follow. Right, with humility, with in solidarity, walking alongside them with no sense of hierarchy. And when I would ask them why they would do this, they would often look at me as if I should know the answer, and they would say, God. This is how God wants us to be in the world. And what struck me was that I met people, I think just by luck or by grace, who were of different religious backgrounds, who had the same answer to why they were doing what they were doing. And so it was clear to me early that a single faith did not have ownership over serving in a way that I admired, that actually it was a common inspiration across faiths, and therefore perhaps a common table around which people from different faiths could come together and do something. And part of the beauty of that is that, Millard Fuller, the founder of Habitat for Humanity, called this the theology of the hammer, which interestingly, he says that he invented Habitat for Humanity principally as an ecumenical movement, because he kept on trying to get his evangelical and mainline Protestant friends to talk, and they wouldn't, but they would work together. And if you created a space where people from different backgrounds could serve together, not only would they build a relationship, but they would both feel as if they were living out an important part of their faith. And because of that relationship and because of the expression of faith, they were able to have a conversation with each other. So when we're asked at IFYC about, what's the first kind of project an interfaith student group should do together, we always say a service project. And when people say, they say to us, our interfaith group is constantly getting hung up on important doctrinal or political challenges, all of which, by the way, are important, right? This is not to dismiss any of them. We say, if you are able to do a service project together, if you're able to center something else, principally other people's immediate needs, it will be both an expression of faith and an opportunity to build bonds across faiths. So I think that that is absolutely essential. And by the way, interfaith work in the United States, the NCCA in 1928, but Hull House, founded by Jane Addams, is probably, if I had to have a pantheon of American heroes, so much of Hull House is inspired by what Jane Addams saw Jews, Catholics, and Protestants doing together service-wise. She comes back and says, we're going to build what she called the Cathedral of Humanity, which would be able to encourage that kind of cooperation here in the United States, 1889.
Thank you so much for coming. It's an honor to be able to speak with you. My name is Emily Sears, and I am a junior here at Queens. I'm a political science major. I'm currently the president of our Interfaith Leadership Council, and I'm a Davies Fellow as well, and I'm also the Civic Engagement Fellow, so I work with voting and voter engagement. As you know and have mentioned this evening, we are hosting the Republican National Convention here in Charlotte in August. And there's already been a lot of conversation here on campus and in the community about how we can work to move beyond political polarization. So what thoughts do you have about how we can promote peaceful dialogue across our political and ideological differences? And more specifically, what role might we play using our religious traditions and identities in this conversation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, for me, it was stories from different religious traditions which best expressed the idea of a good society where everybody could thrive. For me, amongst the most powerful ones is King. At the end of the Montgomery bus boycott, I was just saying to a group of Gambrell scholars earlier, the Montgomery bus boycott wasn't like strolling to work for a couple days in 1956, right? It's 380 plus days long. And there are fire bombings. King's home gets firebombed. There are cross burnings. There are false arrests. It's ugly. It's really ugly, right? And at the end of the bus boycott, King is doing a press conference, and he's asked by a journalist, you all walk to work in an extremely fraught and dangerous environment for over a year, and you won the right to sit front to back on the buses of one provincial city. Aren't you angry? Let's be real, man. Aren't you angry? Isn't this the time for revenge? And King's response is, this isn't the time for revenge. This is the time for redemption. This is the time for reconciliation. This is the time to build the beloved community. And what he is saying with lifted by grace and by his faith is, whatever I have been through, I am imagining a society in which everybody can thrive. Right? And in South Africa, I spent several months in South Africa around the turn of the millennium, and people who had worked in the anti-apartheid movement and who were building a new society, they would say the past is a foreign country. The past is a foreign country, right? And so I love that. I love the idea that we are architects of a society where everybody can thrive, and that society is so beautiful and so resonant and so attractive that people who might exclude you or me or you now, they will see that they will thrive there and we will thrive there. And isn't it better if we all thrive together, right? And so, Edward Markham, poet, has this line, you drew a circle that drew me out, heretic rebel, a thing to flout, but love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that drew you in. And for me, that is a fundamentally sacred idea, right? And in Islam, this story is too long to go into, but the Muslims in the room at least will know what I'm talking about. It's the story for me of Hudaybiyah. It's the story of the Prophet Muhammad returning to Mecca after many years of war, and people joining Islam because they thought it was more beautiful, because they wanted to be in a space of generosity, right? So that's, I think that's whatever energy is around the Republican National Convention. You want to project the image of a city on a hill in which everybody contributes and everyone thrives.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Justin Malone. I'm a junior here at Queens, and I'm a finance major, and I have the opportunity to serve on Rumnian here at Queens. So in Dr. Henderson's class last year, we read your books, Acts of Faith, which shows how your own religious identity grew out of your interfaith relationships. Can you share more about how my generation in finding our religious identity has strengthened you, and how my generation can benefit from talking about religion with people who are different from us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the threads of that book is romantic relationships I happen to have with an LDS woman, a Jewish woman, a Hindu woman, and then my wife, Muslim woman. And at a book signing I was doing, this person asked extremely earnestly, "Did you marry Sarah?" And I was like, "Finish the book." Right? And my wife was like, "I could write a book too, by the way," So, honestly, however many books that you read, and I love reading, like I am a big nerd, right? But I have never learned more than getting an insight into how the goodness of the people in my social circle was inspired by their tradition, right? And that's like literally atheist to Zoroastrian, right? And I happen to have had like intimate relationships with people from different religious backgrounds, and just to know what being a Latter-day Saint meant to my high school girlfriend Lee, or what being Jewish meant to my college girlfriend, it was so powerful. And I'm involved in interfaith work. I mean, I think it is central to being an American, right? Like part of what is unique about America is that we're the first religiously diverse democracy, and I think being an interfaith leader is baked into that. I think it's a command of Islam. It's central to being Muslim. But honestly, I've just had a front row seat to so many other people's goodness and how it was inspired by their religion, and I'd be around them, and I'm like, I want some of that. Like, I want some of that goodness, And as I said, it's like atheist to Zoroastrian. So it's not that a single tradition has a monopoly on this. It's just, it's paying attention to the electric cord of what inspires somebody's goodness and where it comes from, and saying, hey, can I be around that a little bit? So, I mean, part of what I think is possible about American life right now is we're surrounded by diversity, right? And one of the things I think is sad is that too often we still choose to be in a homogenous social circle. So what does it look like to learn from your friends, right? To build a circle of people around you that you admire and to learn from your friends. And I just think there's no place better, like literally on planet Earth, than a college campus to do that. And here you are.
Thank you.
When I woke up this morning and saw the rain in the forecast, I was a little worried. I know oftentimes in Charlotte, when there's inclement weather, that encourages us to stay home. So I am thankful that you all find this work important. I'm glad that you're here. I'm Joey Haynes. I'm the university chaplain and a very proud alumnus of Queens, graduate of 2011, and had Dr. Henderson, actually Suzanne Henderson, in class. In one of the first classes she taught here at Queens, and now we work together and is an excellent boss, and so great to be able to do this work, important work, offer these programs for the community, offer these programs for our students, for our faculty and staff, and we're just so proud to have everyone sort of engaged, involved in this work that is so important. So thank you, Eboo, for being here with us, being our keynote for our Presbyterian and Pluralist Week. And we are especially grateful for our students, the panelists, and all the students who are engaged in interfaith work, engaged in religious and spiritual life here at Queens. They basically make my job the best job in the world, I think, and so I am thankful to be here. So if you would like to learn more, to stay involved, engaged in our work here, we encourage you to drop your business card in one of the jars on one of the front tables or write your contact information down. And if you would like to continue this conversation, we invite you to join us for a reception in the chapel and speak a little bit more with Eboo. So thank you again for being here, and we look forward to seeing you back. Have a good night.